Yemen has been conducting constant operations. And when I say constant, I mean daily operations since the so-called 12-day war hostilities has ended. I mean, it was coordinating with Iran to a certain degree, firing some missiles during that time. But ever since, it's been daily. It sunk 2 ships in the Red Sea. It also now, Professor Marandi, it has been this has been basically Israel. If we look at this image, this has been Israel almost daily because of what Yemen is doing. The sirens are constantly on. Ben Gurion Airport has been targeted. Of course, what we hear over and over again from Israel, just like we heard during the 12-day war, is that these missiles never get through. We also know, Professor Marandi, that Yemen has not only been targeting Ben Gurion Airport, but it's closed down the port of Eilut or Eilat or however it's pronounced. I mean, that is shut down. It's bankrupt because of the constant missile fire that Yemen is waging as part of its blockade. So when we look at failures of the Israeli regime and the U.S. too, this is the biggest one because Yemen is, if you look at all of the data of Yemen as a nation, it shouldn't be able to do this, nor should it be able to fire hypersonic missiles toward Israel on the daily, especially if Israel and the U.S. are supposed to be as boisterous and dominant as they say they are.
I would really love one day to be able to go to Yemen. I've tried a couple of times, but apparently the flight that goes through Jordan, they won't allow me or people with Iranian passports on to get a visa to get to take that flight because you have to get a Jordanian visa and then get on the flight to Yemen. They're wonderful people, and they are the pride. They and Hezbollah and Hamas and Islamic Jihad. They are the pride of and many in the Iraqi resistance. They are the pride of the Arab world. They have stood up for the Palestinian people since day one. When Hezbollah was drawing away the army from Gaza during the onslaught during those first few months, and really helping Hamas and Islamic Jihad and the others to stand up against this blitzkrieg and this genocide the genocide that started. On the other hand, Yemen was shutting down uh, business and trade for the Israeli regime and making life more difficult for them. Of course, sadly, some of the goods were going that they instead of going to Israel, they went to Egypt, and then they would change the ship and then send it to Israel. And then, but also Erdogan in Turkey was allowing goods that the Israelis couldn't get from Asia to be exported from Turkey. But still, this has done huge damage to the Israeli regime. And remember, this is the same Ansar Allah. This is the same Yemeni people who are being starved by the world. I watched. It was pretty long, but I watched Tucker Carlson's interview the other night, and his guest was saying that he was talking about Epstein, and it was a very interesting conversation. It was very long. I mean, it took me like a day and a half to be able to get through it because I couldn't sit down and listen to it the whole time. Listen to it while driving around mostly. But but in it, he was saying that American warships, and this he was witness to this. He was on a warship. They would go in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, and they would find these small boats, and then that were carrying medicine at a time when kids in Yemen were starving and dying of diarrhea, and they would like find medicine, just medicine, and they would dump all of them in the sea. American sailors. So this is the Yemen which was being starved for 7 years by the Americans and the Canadians and the Australians and the Europeans and the British, and the West was starving and strangling them, and the Saudis were bombing them, and the Emiratis were bombing them, and Turkey was and the Qatar were supporting the genocide. Then, of course, after the split between Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, Turkey this and Qatar distanced themselves from the war. But uh, but the point was that everyone was trying to destroy these people. Everyone, and the Arab media was constantly putting out Ansarullah propaganda and saying that they're enemies of Islam and enemies of the Arab world and mercenaries of Iran, and all sorts of hatred was being spout by Al Jazeera, by all these thousands of media outlets that are funded by these oil and gas rich regimes, not just Al Arabiya or Sky News Arabic, or many other outlets. But now they are the pride of the Arab world. People see, so you see that after all that hardship, all that suffering, all the death and the slaughter of women and children through starvation, they remain steadfast. And today, they defeated the United States in the Red Sea. And after their agreement with the United States, they continue to blockade the Israeli regime. And this shows to the rest of us that we have a huge responsibility. As individuals, we're nothing. You, I, others, we feel helpless. But Yemen, which is the poorest country, maybe the poorest country in the world, or one of the poorest countries in the world, through sheer determination and brilliant leadership and a brilliant military, they were able to have a huge impact on what is going on right now in West Asia. I think that's something that we should learn from as individuals. We each have to we have to play our own role, regardless of how helpless we see ourselves. We all have to play our role. And if we do play our role, and if we do carry out our responsibility and support the resistance and support the Palestinian people and oppose the United States and the Israelis, wherever they may be, sincerely, then I think that the Israeli regime, its demise will be much more swift. But we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to, recognize. We have to be honest with ourselves, and if make sure that we're not being complicit in any way or form. There are many things that can be done, whether it's boycotting, whether it's opposing the United States. You can't support the United States in Syria and oppose it in Gaza. It's not doable.
Right.
It won't work. You cannot support the United States in Lebanon and oppose it in Gaza. That's not just hypocritical. It just shows that that person is not serious. But in any case, I think that Yemen has taught us all a huge lesson, but also it's given us hope, because it shows it goes against what was it, the Jerusalem Post? I wasn't looking at the.
Oh yes.
I don't know. It runs against
post-Iran order. Yeah, the post-Iran order, which really what they're saying is resistance itself. I mean, that's how I read it. It's resistance. It's a post-Iran order. That's foolishness. But yeah, resistance itself is
This is not Iran. They are trying to make this about Iran. In other words, Ansarullah is a proxy. Hezbollah is a proxy. Hamas is a proxy. Islamic Jihad is a proxy. The Iraqi resistance, that's nonsense. They all have agency. They're all doing it out of principle. They all made their sacrifices out of principle. Thousands in Lebanon, thousands, maybe more than thousands, tens of thousands in, I don't know, thousands in Yemen, and so on. They've and of course in Gaza, the West Bank, they have made huge sacrifices out of principle, and they have bought time for Gaza, and they have given hope to the rest of us through their resistance. So, what can I say? Who am I to speak about the people of Yemen? Way above the likes of me.
Yeah, well, the one interesting thing if we recall, Professor Marandi, is that during the time there was the bombing campaign of Yemen early in the Trump administration, when it ended, one of the things that angered Israel and really backers of Israel was that part of the stipulation, that agreement, that mysterious so-called ceasefire agreement that was worked out with Ansarullah, which doesn't have any pens of paper to it, but one of the agreements did not include stopping strikes on Israel. So Yemen got essentially indirectly or directly, depending on who you believe, permission to continue, and that's what has happened. And you see this in the Western mainstream media even today. You see responses like this: Trump claimed victory against Houthis in fight over Red Sea shipping. Now they're sinking tankers again. But there's always a tone whenever talking about Ansar Allah in Israeli media and Western media that what happened against Ansar Allah, the war, was not sufficient. And not only was that sufficient, but Israel finds itself now in a protracted war of attrition with Ansar Allah as it tries to produce and pursue this greater Israel project.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I think we have to keep in mind, that the political establishment in the United States and the West, they are all supportive of ethno-supremacism, ethnic cleansing, genocide. It doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrats or whether they're Labor or conservative in the UK and so on and so forth. They're all the same. So if you recall, during the 12-day war with Iran, this war of aggression, we saw on CNN, at least I saw it. I saw the clips of it. I don't watch CNN, but I saw clips where they were talking about sleeper cells, Iranian sleeper cells in the United States. So what was CNN trying to do? CNN was trying to antagonize Iran in the eyes of ordinary Americans. They're trying to create fear and hatred, and they're trying to create fear and hatred towards Iranian Americans. Many of whom had never even seen Iran, like they were American born. Many of them don't even speak Persian, but their parents or their grandparents or whoever, they came from Iran, or maybe one parent. But the point was that they were willing to sacrifice their safety, the safety of all these Iranian Americans in the United States, in order to demonize Iran, in order to justify Trump's war against Iran. That's what it was about. And so, regardless of whether Trump was able to damage Iran's nuclear sites or not, whether he was able to do any real damage or not, Trump's opponents will push for the narrative that the damage was not the damage that he said was not brought about in order to push for war. And that's what they're doing with Ansar Allah. Why? Because the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the liberals, the conservatives, they are all Israeli firsters. They're all Israeli firsters. It's just like with Epstein. Why is it that, like, the Democrats during the Biden years, they didn't do anything about Epstein? Because their own people are just as deeply involved. Their own donors are just as deeply involved.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking the whole time about Epstein. When people say, when Trump says, "Why does the Democrats do it, making it partisan?" It's like, come on, that this is not, that this isn't a partisan affair. This is a bipartisan affair. But
Yeah,
continue.
exactly. I mean, he was arrested when Trump was president. They killed him when Trump was, or they suicided him when Trump was president. During the Biden years, they didn't do anything about it. It's because the elites in the United States, it's one party. I mean, they may have differences over abortion or some other issues, but the real issues, global hegemony,
Right.
have never-ending wars, empire, and that sort of thing, the Israeli regime, that is something where there's a consensus. And in comparison to these other issues, though, these are the main issues. The millions of people who are being slaughtered and countries being destroyed and the mass movement of populations and from across the region, these are the key issues. And these are what have impoverished the United States also more than anything else, these endless wars, the middle class and so on. So there's no difference between the two. So they will try to humiliate Trump on Yemen. They'll try to humiliate Trump on Iran in order for war in order to prepare the grounds for war. I mean, no one is CNN is not asking itself about these Sleeper cells. They were talking about these Iranian sleeper cells a couple of weeks ago. Well, what happened? Did they carry out their operations? Have they been arrested? No, because that wasn't the point. There were no sleeper cells. They just want war, just like Saddam Hussein's the lies that they promoted in order to justify the war against Iraq, or in order to invade Libya and destroy Libya, or the dirty war in Syria. I mean, the OPC. Remember, just Al Jazeera. Oof, Al Jazeera did a tweet yesterday. I responded to it. They said that what Israel is doing to Syria is making it more difficult to figure out what Assad did with his chemical weapons.
Oh, man.
I mean,
Obsessed.
that's disgraceful. They know there are no chemical weapons. They and their ISIS and Al Qaeda allies, their takfiri allies, have been in charge for 7 months now. Of course, there are no chemical weapons. I mean, they'll try to find something. They'll make up something. But there were no chemical weapons. And the OPCW, I mean, Aaron Matei, he's done a lot of work on this, and so has a number of our other friends. Very good. Lots of good people have done a lot of good work. But from the very beginning in Duma, when the OPCW sent its experts, they went in there and said, no, this is not, the signs don't show, there's no sign that the Syrian government did this. And then when they went back, these people were sidelined, and others were, a political report was written. And when these whistleblowers came out, no one said anything. Why? Because there was a consensus. No, that the narrative was that Assad gassed his own people. So Al Jazeera, along with the Western media, they're all the same. I remember when I was in Beirut when the Israelis murdered Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, when he was martyred. And he was also predicting what would happen in Syria. I mean, what we're seeing today in Syria is exactly what he said would happen. And he tried his best to save the Syrian people. And those people who willfully close their eyes, they're answerable for all these deaths that we see today, and for the success that Netanyahu has had. And they will continue to lie and pretend that it was Iran's fault or what. History will show what they did to the Syrian people. And if they want to be redeemed, they have to do something about it. They have to make up for this mess that they've created. But in any case,
Right.
so I was in Beirut when he was martyred, and I went there the day before, and the day after, I think it was, he was martyred. Al Jazeera asked me to be, I think it was, well, anyway, around that time, but it was after he was martyred. Al Jazeera asked me to be on their news program. Then right before me, they brought in a reporter to Beirut, and it was the top of the hour, and she started bad mouthing Iran. Iran is horrible. Iran violates. I mean, they're bombing Beirut. They're bringing down apartment blocks. They're calling these Hezbollah strongholds, in order to justify the slaughter of ordinary Lebanese. And then this reporter is bad mouthing Iran. And then when they came to me. I said, "Why is your reporter talking about Iran? What is this? What is what's going on right now? The slaughter in Beirut of ordinary citizens by the Israeli regime. What does that have to do with human rights in Iran?" So yeah, so Al Jazeera yesterday, I think it was, they tweeted that so it just shows where these people stand. I mean, they're good people in Al Jazeera. They're good people in but I'm talking about these institutions. It's I mean, they're good people in the BBC. I know some good people. I remember a couple of times actually when I had a important debate or something on the BBC, and then someone would call me from inside the BBC. More than once. And they said, look, they're setting you up, and just be careful.
Right.
That sort of thing. So they're good people. But the point is that this is how the Western media works. This is how regional media works. And that is why we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had a similar experience with Sky News during COVID, 2020-ish times when China was more in the conversation. I was brought on a couple of times by someone who was definitely more sympathetic. And he would say, be careful about like what's going to happen, traps. And then they stopped inviting me. And that's kind of what happens when you say the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. During the 12-day war, I was only invited by Sky twice. Once I didn't have a decent internet connection,
Right.
and the BBC maybe once, and then they withdrew it because right after Sky. I think it was very controversial. My exchange with the reporter on Sky, and it went viral. And then as soon as that finished, the BBC just withdrew it and said we have a change in schedule and we're not covering Iran like it's a war. It's top of the news, but so it's interesting that in the past they would I'd constantly be invited, but during the 12-day war, I was almost exclusively speaking on alternative media, which is fine with me. I'm I don't care for mainstream media, legacy media.
There is worry. It's not just Yemen sinking ships or closing the ports. It's also attempting to use this uh, continued resistance to the Israeli regime, and of course the United States backing it, to build up toward war with Iran. So Wall Street Journal reports that Yemen, so this is not Ansar Allah, the
But
YAF, yes,
Daddy, look at the title. Actually, it's quite interesting.
yeah,
Iran is, I think it's a mistake. They should rewrite it. Iran is moving to rearm its militia
allies.
allies, not proxies.
Yep, yeah,
See
yeah. That's almost legitimized them by accent.
yeah.
Oops. But what they're saying here is that over the last several weeks, in the month of July, we have seen the U.S.-backed Yemen regime, which has ostensibly very little power comparatively to Ansar Allah's influence with the people, but it supposedly intercepted Iranian weapons moving to supply Ansar Allah, and then Syria, which has been a concern for those who saw the overthrow of Assad as a very negative thing for the resistance as a whole. The terror Al Qaeda government in Syria has supposedly intercepted weapons from Iran that were heading toward Hezbollah. What do you make of this overall narrative? We're never able to verify these things because this is all just hearsay from the Western intelligence, from the Western mainstream media. But at the same time, this is something we continuously hear, and yet what we hear from the Yemeni side, Ansar Allah side, from the Iranian side, from the resistance side is that they're producing their own weapons. They are making use of what they have to indigenous capabilities. So what's your assessment of this?
Well, there's no doubt that they have indigenous capabilities. They're smart people in Yemen, Lebanon, and of course, Iran will help them have enhance those indigenous capabilities, and I'm sure that Iran will help them uh, with in any by any means necessary if there's something that they cannot produce themselves. And the same is true in Gaza. The reason why Gaza still is able to remain defiant is because of the courage of the resistance fighters, but also they're receiving support. It's obvious that somehow weapons are getting in, 2 years. So it's almost 2 years now. So something they're, obviously they're getting support from somewhere. And by the way, the general who was in charge of aiding the resistance in Gaza was one of the people who was martyred by the Israeli regime on the first day. But of course, he's been replaced, and they will continue to support. But it is interesting, by the way, because that so-called post-Iran, which is really post-resistance, not Iran. This is much bigger than Iran. The axis of resistance, Yemen is an equal partner. It's Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and the Iraqi resistance. They're all in this together. So this post-resistance era apparently is not something that the Wall Street Journal fully agrees with. And they can say that they've intercepted whatever. Who knows? As you say, we cannot verify what they say. But in general, I don't trust anything that comes from the Western media. If during the 12-day war, what they were saying about the war was that Iran is losing throughout. And then, so why was it? And then we saw Bannon at the end of the war, Steve Bannon, who was very well informed, basically say that the real story is that Trump saved Israel.
Yep.
So, but what we were hearing throughout the 12 days was that Iran is in trouble, and Iran is, the Israeli, and when the Israelis were like slaughtering innocent people, they were saying these are precision strikes. They to kill a general, let's say, they would kill everyone in the building. To kill a scientist, to murder a scientist, they'd murder everyone in the building. That's not precision. That's not even like, that's no intelligence coup either. Like a major general, if he lives somewhere, his neighbors know who he's not. There's no secret homes or secret neighborhoods in Iran. They live in Tehran. And then to strike a building and kill 30 children, 20 children, 15 children to get one person, Western media likes to call it a precision strike and an intelligence coup. How's that an intelligence coup? How is that precision? So anything that comes from the Western media, especially outlets like Reuters or the New York Times, these are like the worst of the worst. I don't take seriously ever. And sometimes, when something comes up and people send me messages and they're worried, I usually tell them, look, if it's Reuters, just forget it. I mean, just 3 years ago, they were saying like Ayatollah Khamenei is, the New York Times was saying we have 5 sources or something that Ayatollah Khamenei is on his deathbed. Okay. Then the next day, literally, he had a public. He was seen in he had a public meeting, and he had a speech like 2 days later. But there's no accountability in the West because these media outlets they're not journalists. That information is given to them by Western governments and intelligence agencies. They say, run with this. We need you to say this. We're carrying out, this is all psychological warfare. So I wouldn't take anything that they say seriously. I'm not saying ignore it completely, but I'm saying, they're not credible. I trust the North Korean news agency more than I trust any Western news agency.
I always say, if the Western mainstream media, if Israeli media, sometimes Israeli media can almost be hilariously truthful in some senses, just because of the hubris. Is just so it is just so far grown at this point. It's just it's sticking out of the
The
pot.
Hebrew media is pretty outrageous.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes.
They won't say what they really think. Their racism, their supremacism, and their ugliness.
Nope.
It's not really shown that much in English. But in
No,
Hebrew
yeah,
and
I can imagine.
Telegram channels and all that, they are horrific.
Drew, I just want to pull this article up one more time so people know what you were referencing about the Middle East post-Iran era has begun. This is what some thinkers inside of the Jerusalem Post are saying, but in the same vein as you said, Professor Randi, you have Ansarallah continuing this operation. You have the resistance continuing. I mean, Israel is not. They are wrecking Gaza. There's no doubt about that. They're committing a genocide, but the resistance is continuing, and you have Al Qassam coming out with announcements saying that they are staying steadfast in ensuring that any kind of settlement that happens, cessation of hostilities, whatever it is that happens there, is not only full and of course can be held accountable, which I don't think that's a possibility. To be honest, at this point, there is no holding Israel to account, but they're being very steadfast in saying, no, they're going to continue to deal and fight with Israel as much as they can for however long as it takes. That's not really the narrative that we're hearing in the Western mainstream media. Every other day, there's articles like that one, Professor Marandi from the Jerusalem Post. Iran is defeated. Hezbollah is defeated. Hamas is defeated. Yemen is defeated. That's what you
Danny,
hear.
sadly, those who antagonize Iran, and some of them, they pretend that they're supporters of Palestine. They're, as I said, they're these sort of influenced by takfiri ideology, and even though they may not think themselves as Salafi or Wahhabi or Takfiri or followers of Ibn Taymiyyah or Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, but they're influenced by that. And they like to believe everything that's negative about Iran or the resistance. So they like to say that Hezbollah was defeated because they hate Hezbollah. I mean, Hezbollah sacrificed itself so much for the Palestinian people. What have they done? I mean, if what have they done for Palestine? What have any of these countries done for Palestine? Which of these countries are sanctioned? Which of these countries have been punished by the United States? Not a single one of them. Which of them have, paid a price? And and they always make these excuses. One day they say, well, no, behind the scenes, Iran is doing a deal. Okay, now Iran's been bombed. Now what's the narrative? But it's always something negative. So they'll say it's the resistance has been defeated. I remember after the ceasefire, these people were speaking with such contempt for Hezbollah and gloating how Hezbollah in their eyes was defeated, gloating that Hezbollah was defeated. These people have problems. They have to rethink, and I think their whole worldview has a problem. They have to look deep inside and think about what's wrong inside for them to think this way and to behave this way and to show such hatred and such irrational hatred. Why do they fear Iran so much? Why do they fear the resistance so much? The resistance, all it has done is it has kept the name of Palestine alive. No one else has done it. And by the way, when I spoke about Bosnia, it was also Hezbollah that went to Bosnia to help them. And Hezbollah went to Yemen to help. From what we're hearing, I'm not privy to this sort of thing, but Hezbollah has shown images of their martyrs who were previously in Yemen. So they helped build up the resistance in Yemen. But these people, out of this irrational hatred and this takfiri ideology, and it's promoted by people who I can name. I know some of these people. I've met them. I've been with them. I don't want to speak about anyone who's not online right now who can defend himself or herself. But the point is that they are part of this narrative. They contribute to the Western narrative. They contribute to the anti-resistance narrative. They're constantly attacking Iran and Hezbollah. Yet Abu Ubaidah, he keeps thanking Iran and Yemen and Hezbollah, but they pretend that they don't hear that. He hasn't thanked anyone else but these entities, but they pretend that they don't hear that. Why? Because they're caught up in this very strange worldview that they have.